All right, good afternoon. My name is Don Ficken. I'm with the Lights Out Heartland Task Force, and we're here today to do our very first video to share with you what some of the work that we're doing with Lights Out Heartland and some of the things we're discovering as we talk with others. We've got a great program on, it's actually a capstone project called a Bird Strike Collision Prevention Project that our person here, Jacob, will be talking about in just a moment. Before we get started in our presentation, and by the way, we'll be taking some questions, but if you can put those into Facebook, if you can put in the comments area, we'll take those at the end. And if you happen to be on Zoom, we do have a few Zoom players here. Please just put those in the chat area. Before we get started with that, I want to just briefly kind of go a little bit about what Lights Out Heartland is all about. Some of you may not have ever heard about Lights Out Heartland. And we are basically a collaboration of organizations that relate to either Missouri or the connecting states. We have a number of members from Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, and we're looking to expand the program. We've not been around that long. And really our goal is to turn off or reduce outdoor lights, and particularly during key migration periods of May and September to help birds migrate safely between their nesting and winding grounds. Now, you can learn more about this. We won't be able to cover that very much right now about Lights Out Heartland itself, but you can learn more about it at our website, lightsout.heartland.org. And just to kind of briefly explain that birds, obviously right now, they're migrating. They're migrating in a really big way. 3 to 5 billion birds migrate through basically through the United States and Canada every year. 70% of those birds are migratory, and most of those migrate actually at night. And you can see in this graphic on the left-hand side that the Mississippi Flyway, where I live, is a really big one, but also the Central Flyway. So right up through the heartland part of the U.S. is really a big deal. Now, the problem with the migration is that birds get confused with artificial light. When you shine lights up into the sky, the birds are looking for stars and moon for navigation, and those lights that simply disorientate or confuse them, and it'll help also draw them into urban and suburban areas that cause problems. And there's everything from high rises that are problems, even though they're a percentage less for high buildings to be. As far as mortality, I think the actual strikes at those buildings, the deaths are really, really higher, but also low rises. And what was surprising to me is actually residences where people live are a significant part of that. But the good news is that you can do some stuff if you turn off lights. One of the studies in Chicago found that it really reduced bird deaths a lot by simply reducing lights. Our website, Lights Out Heartland, if you go to the front page, it's got a nice graphic that talks about things you can do. I'm not going to go through that right now, but you can download that graphic and you can learn a little bit more about that. And so if you can't do it all year, just think about May and September, and I think you'll really help the birds. So we are doing these programs now. We're doing it this month in September, obviously today. And this is the Bird Strike Collision Project. Next November, so we meet every 2 months. We're going to have Washington University in St. Louis talk about some really interesting stuff they've been doing with their Lights Out Heartland program. And you'll hear about drones flying over at night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and why are the tennis court lights still on, kinds of things. So with that, I'm going to basically stop sharing here, and I'm going to bring up Jacob's presentation because that's really what you came to hear about. And let's just get started with that. So
I see.
Okay, cool. All right, Jacob, you want to introduce yourself and talk about this really cool program? I'm very excited to hear about what you've got going on there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, hello, my name is Jacob Davis, and I'm a biologist working for the Missouri Department of Conservation. I earned my Bachelor's of Science degree in Wildlife and Natural Resource Conservation from the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg, Missouri in 2018. So I can't believe it's been 5 years since I've graduated college. After graduation, I worked and volunteered at many local nature centers and conservation areas, just around Blue Springs, as a suburb of Kansas City, Lee Summit, basically everywhere. And last year, I enrolled in the Missouri Master Naturalist Program, coordinated by the University of Missouri Extension in the Missouri Department of Conservation. As part of that program, I recently completed my Capstone Project to apply bird window strike prevention measures to 6 of the windows near the bird feeder area at Lakeside Nature Center in Kansas City, Missouri. I have many hobbies, but most enjoy birding, especially during spring and fall migration, because, as Don mentioned in the start of the presentation, this is a big time of year. Basically, from about March to May or so is spring migration, and then fall migration is happening right now through, I would say, most of October. I have a real admiration for birds in their natural habitat. That's why I studied biology, but I'm saddened when I come across dead birds while working at Lakeside Nature Center. I've come across, maybe before I started the project and throughout the process, maybe 3 different dead birds, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's still concerning, and it was definitely a problem. These birds have died as a result of flying into highly reflective windows at the Nature Center at Lakeside. And so I was interested to learn more on how I could help prevent these window strikes. Next slide. I've noticed these bird strikes at Lakeside Nature Center and wondered how big of a problem it really was. I was shocked to learn that an estimated 1 billion birds die in North America from window collisions each year alone, due to collisions with windows in urban and suburban areas. Migrating birds unfamiliar with their surroundings are unable to see exterior window glass in their search for habitat as they're moving back. They just want to get back. They want to establish nesting territories. So they're not really thinking about windows. Resident birds like our black-capped chickadees and northern cardinals and many others are often attracted to reflective windows. They mistake them as an extension of the sky or surrounding trees. This inability to see the glass results in collisions at full speeds, which can be fatal. And if you've ever seen a northern, like for example, northern cardinal will often chase its reflection in a window, or it'll think it's a competitor male. So that's why this is such a huge problem. And that 1 billion birds dying each year is a statistic courtesy of Fatal Light Awareness Program in Canada. Next slide. And so why is this a problem? This problem not only affects the bird population, but the entire ecosystem, and it may be altered due to the continuing decline of our bird populations. Birds, most passerine birds, especially during both parts of migration, eat a variety of different insects, which could be crop pests, so they're crucially important at pest control to protect our valued crops. Like bees, there are a lot of bird species that are also key pollinators, such as hummingbirds. I know throughout the United States, we get several different species of hummingbirds. In the Midwest, basically, this part of the country where I'm at, we get exclusively ruby-throated, but they're valuable pollinators. That is according to the U.S. Forest Service. Tourism is also credited with positive economic activity, so we want to protect our feathered friends. And this is a shocking statistic I discovered. Annual bird collision deaths in the United States account for approximately 10% of the bird population, according to Science News. Next slide. And so you find a dead bird near a big building, like my dad works in a building near here with glass windows, or you might see one. I've found dead birds at restaurants that have windows. So you're wondering, you see a dead bird, sometimes they do survive the collision, they just get a little stunned, but you still wonder how you prevent these or report these strikes and hopefully prevent them from happening. In the Kansas City area, you can visit www.birdsafekc.org. That is a database maintained by the Missouri River Bird Observatory to record the collision. And they're very interesting in collecting data and studying this problem and try to offer, they'll mention on their website, they'll try to offer cost-effective solutions to make buildings more bird safe. Excuse me. Outside the Kansas City area, I looked at a lot of different possibilities of reporting websites and reporting methods. The one I found that I liked the most was the Global Bird Collision Mapper. I thought that might be a good place to start. and you just can peruse these sites. I know at BirdSafe KC, they give an option to say what kind of bird it was, where you found it, the general area. So you can get the more descriptive detail you can give the reviewer, the better, so they can, like I said, really offer cost-effective solutions and hopefully mitigate any chance of window collisions. Next slide. So I've been talking a lot about why it's a problem, but I also want to discuss the project, different mitigation methods that I found as I was doing my project and really researching. So it's good, like I said, it's good to report a collision, but it's even better to take measures to prevent the collision from even happening in the first place. During my research, I found several different mitigation methods that I thought worked well. I'll discuss all 4 of these, but 2 of them I found particularly effective. The best prevention measure, in my opinion, is to install exterior window cords, or they're sometimes called Zen window curtains or Acopian bird savers. If you look up on Google just Acopian bird savers, you should be able to find them. These are quite effective and the least labor intensive to install. They work well. These type of window curtains work well when trying to prevent bird strikes on windows with multiple stories tall. So if you have a really high up window, it could be a good solution. The only disadvantage I've found was their initial high cost, but in terms of durability, they last many years. And I also looked up on the internet, and if you want a cheaper version of mitigation method 1 that I've been discussing, I looked, there's like some old paracord you could use, or some sort of shoelace, some preferably brand new shoelace cord. The main disadvantage to using shoelace cord or some sort of paracord could be the possibility of it wearing down quickly, but they're usually fairly durable. A very cost-effective DIY solution is to use acrylic or enamel paint pens to add some sort of decorations, as you can see in mitigation 2. I've seen people draw. I have a friend who drew different patterns of birds or different kind of mosaics, and they're very cost effective, but they can be time consuming and may not last as long as some of the other mitigations. And then window decals, which I've seen around various nature centers in Kansas City and Blue Springs and surrounding areas, are pretty unique. They're pretty cost effective. I didn't find anything that was too expensive when I researched it, but they may not be as effective in preventing window strikes, in my opinion, as you can see in picture 3. And then the mitigation method I used was method 4, the window dots. They are very cost effective. They're not super expensive unless you're doing a major project. The dots I used are supposed to last up to 10 years, but they're very labor intensive. I would say I would prefer mitigation method 1, the curtains or cords, and the window dots, just because of their durability and their effectiveness. Next slide. So this is the company I used, Feather Friendly, to do my project. As I said, they're very affordable. They were only, I think I spent $50 for 6 large windows. They're not super expensive. The dots or markers, as the website refers to them, are supplied on a 100-foot roll, which is about enough to treat 6 feet of window material. And everything you need comes in the package. They'll send you a package that looks something like this. I don't know if it's backwards in the screen, but window collision tape. And it comes with this package that I just showed, comes with instructions. It comes with disposable tape measures, the tape itself, a squeegee, and some flyers. And I'll actually show some of the items that come with it. So it's easier to see when it's up on the window. I don't know how visible it is here, but the color of these dots is kind of a white gray. So they turn around here. It's kind of hard to see here, but those are the dots, and then you would just go over the window and roll them out, and I'll explain that in the next slide. But and then I got this little sticker that talks about the 1 billion birds dying from window collisions each year. Something I thought was cool was they sent you a pamphlet on how the window markers work, what doesn't work. They've got their what to do if the bird is alive. So a whole lot of useful information in this packet. I think they send you a couple with each packet you order. And then this is the blue squeegee, which I will talk about, I believe, in the next slide. So next slide, please. So this is the application process, and it's generally, I would say it's pretty simple. In general, you want to follow the manufacturer's instructions, and the most important part is to clean the window surface thoroughly before attempting to apply any dots on the surface. So the dots are on the carrier tape, as I just showed. So what I did first is spray the windows with an ammonia-based cleaner, such as like a Windex or you can always get some sort of Walmart off-brand. I don't think it has to be a certain one. I just found that Windex worked best to remove dirt and any debris or anything that might get in the way. And after that, I wiped down the window surface with a second time with a mix of isopropyl alcohol and water to ensure the windows were clean. And again, that no dirt or residual film or debris was remaining on the window surface. I had a couple people help me with the project. And what we did was we wiped down the wetness and everything with a paper towel and just made sure that, again, that the debris was not on there, because the tape and the dots won't work well and won't apply right if the surface of the window is still wet. After the windows are, like I said, are completely dry, you want to apply the dots, which come, as I showed, embedded in the tape. And as you can see, I think the picture does a pretty good job of showing it, but they come in the tape is a thin strip, which you can apply horizontally or vertically, but I've personally found that applying horizontally was the best, because you want parallel rows. You don't want everything so wonky and out of sorts. And it just in my opinion, looks a little more aesthetically better. So that's why I recommend, or I said horizontally, I meant vertically, sorry. The most challenging part of the application process is keeping the tape rolls parallel to the window frame and to one another. The kit from the manufacturer, like I said, includes a small plastic squeegee. So this squeegee, which you use to apply a high amount of pressure to ensure the tape is firmly attached to the window surface. So what you would do is you've got a strip of tape with dots in the back. So you would run down it with the squeegee and really make sure it stuck on well. And finally, once the tape is on, once you got all your rolls on, you're going to want to remove the tape part, as you can see in the photo here on the slide, carefully at a 45-degree angle. If you just yank it off as fast as you can, you're going to, even if you get a good roll, the dots are just going to come right off, and it's not going to work right. Because the 1/4-inch dots are spaced exactly 2 inches apart on the tape, the goal is to have a 2-inch by 2-inch grid of evenly spaced dots on the window surface. Next slide. So I think I mentioned it briefly, but what happens when something doesn't go right? You know, you put the tape on and the dots stick, or something's wrong. So I ran into a few problems during my project. The tape strips are thin and the window surface is large. So when you're just starting out, it can be hard. Starting a new window with no rows on it can be hard to line up everything parallel. But with practice, that usually gets easier. Once you've gotten a few rows, you can kind of see if, you're slanted a little bit one way or the other, and it'll make a little more sense once you get going. The biggest problem I noticed was that several dots would fail to adhere properly to the window surface instead, and would begin peeling off with the tape. So you'd peel the tape off, and what the dots are supposed to do is stick to the window, but some of them didn't. So what I found worked best was going even slower if you had to at a 45-degree angle and really using the squeegee on the dots and rubbing it on the dots, not super hard, but just enough to make sure it's stuck. What I noticed, if it was just one dot, I wouldn't be too worried about it. But if it was several, like I had a roll where 3 or 4 or 5 dots were coming off at a time, then that I determined that that was a manufacturing or a lot issue from the tape. And so unfortunately, there was no other solution for that other than to contact the manufacturer, Feather Friendly, and have them replace the rolls, which they gladly did. Thankfully, they had pretty good customer service. And this delayed my project a couple months, but I was still able to get it finished. And I'm actually a certified Missouri Master Naturalist now that I've finished my project. So it feels good to be done after several months. Next slide. So in conclusion, the Lakeside Nature Center window mitigation project was successful. The Nature Center director was happy with the results, and it's my hope that the project will save many birds. Are there any questions?
So let's see what we got going on here. Let me go back. I'm gonna have to close out my screens. 1 second here. So I'm looking up here. By the way, if you've got a question, make sure that you place it in in the Facebook comments. So I have a question. So that was largely a commercial type of building. So what about homeowners? For example, I have birds striking my windows, and I have, a typical window with little dividers and all that kind of stuff. But apparently that's spread out too much. Those dividers are spread out too much. Can you put the dots, I guess, that way? Does that make sense? In other words, it's probably much bigger than 2 inch by 2 inches. What I think that's what you said is the size, right?
Yeah, typically. So when they're spaced, yeah, they're about 2 inch by 2 inch. So they're spaced out. So it creates some sort of a visual barrier for the birds. I would think with your window, you could still be able to do that. That would probably still work. Yeah, you could fiddle around with some stuff, or like if you needed to use one of the other mitigation methods I mentioned, they're the other two, the paint pens and the silhouettes of the birds. Like as I mentioned, effectiveness may not be as high, but it would still be a mitigation effort because I'd rather save one bird or 2 birds than no birds. So that's my whole philosophy on that. But yeah, the dots could still work for that too. Yeah, absolutely.
So do they come in colors, by the way? I'm sure.
I think so. I noticed the ones like I tried to, I don't know if it showed up well on the camera. Let's see if I can. So you
Yeah.
notice they kind of come in like a white or a gray. I think I looked on the website, there's like a dark black or a darker gray color that they come into. The cool thing, I was actually at Lakeside Nature Center today. I volunteer there every week, and I was looking at the windows, and I from the inside, they're so nondescript that you can't see the dots. They're not a physical. That's something I forgot to mention. You can't physically see the dots. So if you're looking on the inside of a building, so they're not a big eyesore, which is nice. That may be visually a problem with the window cords, even though they're the most effective, is that you can, you're always seeing them, but either method works well, in my opinion.
So any sense for how effective these are?
So I just finished putting up the dots. I think it was, I mentioned before, we started about 2 weeks ago. I have not seen, now it's just 2 weeks, but we are in the middle of fall migration right now. I went out near the feeder area today. I didn't see any dead birds, which is a good sign. Uh, that's not to say, we also have a resident Cooper's hawk at Lakeside Nature Center that likes to chase the birds into the window and smack them against the window so he doesn't have to put in any effort for live hunting. So that could be another issue too. um,
Oh my goodness.
but I mean, it's just talk about lazy, but that could be an issue too. But to answer your question, no, thankfully I have not seen any yet. And I hope, fingers crossed, I hope I don't.
I have one comment here that someone bought the decals and they think that black is for two-sided glass like a patio and that gray is for window glass. Have you heard anything about that at all?
I think, yeah, one of the at my job where I work, a Kansas City local surrounding area, Kansas City Nature Center, we have both. Actually, we have both the cords and the silhouettes. And the silhouettes, I think that's true because the silhouettes we have there are the black ones. So I think there is some truth to that. Yeah, absolutely.
So another question for you is, and I'm not seeing too many questions right now from a group here, but that's okay. So
Mhm.
I know that it's not just the window reflectiveness that is an issue, right? It's also sometimes where the window is located. In other words, it could be
Mhm.
under a canopy or on the bright side where the sun is or not on the sun or whatever else. So is anything about where are there some windows that you need to really have dotted and some you don't? In other words, because if they're not in a sunshine area, or does it make a difference?
I hadn't researched too much into that, but my opinion would be that, I mean, I would just personally, I would just go crazy and dot them all because I would want to prevent any possible window strike collision. But I had heard, like, with the sun on windows reflecting off of it, yeah, I've heard those could be more dangerous windows because the sun reflects, they're just not thinking. I think I heard, like, this is a little bit different, but bald eagles crashing into like the windmills in Kansas and stuff, and windmill fatalities, which is a little different, but uh I think I heard like 70% of a bald eagle's brain or skull is meant for looking down and looking for prey. So they're not really thinking about too much critical thinking about what's in front of them. So,
Right.
yeah,
And so is Lakeside Nature Center, is that pretty much a single story building or is that multiple stories?
it's it's all one story. It's all one floor, but it's one floor, but it's tall. So the windows go up quite high. Um, So there were some windows that were way up high that I would have liked to have done, but there's the issue with getting a ladder up there, and um, you would have to get a pretty tall ladder and truck, and I didn't want to put I can be injury prone, so I didn't want to put myself or any of my helpers in danger, you know. So hopefully that the six windows will mitigate those window strikes.
Well, this has been a great project, and we're coming up on our half hour here. I thought this was really interesting. I've not actually looked into doing the windows treatments myself. We don't have that many issues with our home, at least, but I know that a lot of businesses and a lot of our partners here, they also do what's called a bird safe program, and they actually go and look at tall buildings and find out what's going on. And certainly, we talk about light pollution being a factor, right? That's definitely a big
Mhm.
issue. But also, I think simply the way that windows are designed and make them look like they can fly right through, and they sometimes think they'll give it a try. And those dots sound like a pretty good idea. In fact, the cords actually look pretty good too. This looks
Mhm.
like it's something pretty simple, and it's maybe that's something you could put up for a short time to see if it made a difference for you, right? So
Yeah. And the thought with this was I mentioned that the 10-year with the dots, they were that's the website I guessed. My thinking behind putting up a doing a project like that is that maybe in the future the dots, maybe in a few years, they don't last as long, they wear down. That's a lot of Missouri Master Naturalist classes to go through, and potentially someone sees that and says, oh, I can do that project that that guy did, but maybe do it better, or they find a method that works better, and I'm all for that. So
all right. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for sharing your capstone project. Sounds like how long did that take you? How many months was that overall?
I did one session of about 5 hours back in June on a really hot day. For some reason, I managed to choose the hottest days to do some of these things.
Yeah, I know it
And
is.
then a couple weeks ago, I finished up with a 4 hour session. So I put a total of about 9 hours into it. I had some people help me do the windows. It would take one person just forever to do even those six windows. It just took a while. So
Right.
um,
All right.
Not a
Well,
lot of time.
well, thank you, Jacob, for sharing your expertise and your learnings today. It was a fun project. And again, it's already on Facebook right now. So those who are on Facebook will be able to watch it. We are recording this, and I'll stop the recording just a minute, and I'll slice it up and I'll put it on our front page of our Lights Out Heartland website. I do encourage you, if you're not familiar with Lights Out Heartland, to poke around the website a little bit. The little small action you could take could actually save a hummingbird or a woodpecker or something else. And it doesn't take much time to really think about some of the stuff. It could be as simple as turning off your lights, is whatever comes down to, just particularly a light that you don't need. That may make the difference. So thanks, Jacob. We're going to stop sharing, and we're going to get on, stop for Facebook Live. We're going to get on with our regular meeting. And I really appreciate your time today. And thank you so much.